really getting into the life of Alexander Hamilton. Always fascinating, definitely debated.
A complex figure, for sure.
And our main source here is Ron Chernow's biography. It's, acclaimed, very detailed. It gives us a specific look at Hamilton's whole journey.
Exactly.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack some key moments, those relationships, the contradictions, all as Chernow lays them out in the book. We're looking at how the text itself brings his story to life, using the details Chernow provides from the source material you gave us.
Right. And Chernow's approach, it isn't just a simple timeline. He's really trying to get at the why. What drove Hamilton? What forces shaped him? And he starts somewhere maybe a bit surprising.
Far from the battlefields we usually think of.
Yeah, exactly. Far away.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Chernow puts us right in the Caribbean, 18th century Nevis and St. Croix. And he paints this picture, not of sleepy islands, but, well, pretty intense places.
Oh, absolutely. Crossroads, European rivalries, the sugar trade, which was huge, driven by tastes back in Europe, big money, big conflicts.
And Chernow really emphasizes how Hamilton's, let's say, challenging start in this kind of volatile place was just fundamental. It shaped him.
Definitely. The text gives details about his mother, Rachel. Describes her as bright, beautiful, strong-willed, too. Inheriting property, moving, maybe connecting with the Littons.
And Chernow highlights a connection that feels, well, kind of poignant later on. His first cousin, Anne Lytton Benton.
Right. The text points out that just before the duel, Hamilton actually said she was the person he felt under the greatest obligations to as a friend.
Wow.
Yeah, Chernow uses that detail, doesn't he, to show this sort of hidden layer of connection, gratitude maybe, contrasting with her later life, which the text says was really difficult, even though Hamilton tried to help out financially and legally.
It adds depth. And the text also gives us a window into young Hamilton, the businessman.
Oh, yeah. Chernow points to these revealing business letters. Shows a real take-charge mode already. There's that great quote the book uses where he's collecting money with this peculiar zeal, writing, "Believe me, sir, I done as hard as is proper."
Even then.
Even then. It's a small thing, but Chernow uses it to show that intensity was just there from the start, like with those miserable mules on the sloop Thunderbolt he mentions.
Those details really make it vivid. And then there's this famous hurricane letter. Chernow digs into that, too.
He does. He notes the sort of gloomy thoughts for a teenager, right? An apocalyptic sense, a somber view of the cosmos, but also that strain of youthful idealism, calling out the rich.
And Chernow really frames this as a turning point.
Absolutely. He calls a hurricane his salvation, basically. That letter caused such a stir, it helped him quite literally write his way out of poverty.
With help, of course.
Right. The text mentions that network, Hugh Knox, those key donors like Kruger, Courtwright, Beekman, Stevens, and Lytton Benton again. Chernow even throws in the idea that maybe the business guys hoped he'd come back as a doctor.
So this Caribbean crucible, as Chernow presents it, really forged him. Then he gets to America, and the focus shifts. Education, the early revolution stuff.
Yeah, the text covers his studies, Elizabethtown Academy, King's College,
Yeah.
soaking up Blackstone and Coke, the legal heavyweights, though he didn't actually graduate formally.
And Chernow highlights this kind of clash at King's. Dr. Miles Cooper, the president.
Right. Cooper apparently indulged Hamilton at first, but then, as the text says, was just appalled when Hamilton started hanging out with the Sons of Liberty.
Cooper didn't hold back.
No. Chernow quotes him calling them sons of licentiousness, faction, and confusion. It really shows Hamilton already moving towards that revolutionary buzz, away from the establishment.
Chernow also brings in physical descriptions from friends, like Fisher Ames.
The text details his strong and striking jaw, slim and elegant figure, the buoyant lightness in his walk, and his eyes deep azure, eminently beautiful, beaming intelligence. Chernow weaves these in, to give you a feel for his actual presence.
Then the war starts. Artillery captain.
Yeah, and the text mentions that awful accident, the cannon.
Oh, right. Some soldiers were drunk, didn't sponge it properly.
Exactly. Fatal consequences. Chernow notes Hamilton was crushed by the incident, sought a different command, a small but really significant moment of tragedy early in his military career, as presented in the text.
Which leads him eventually to Washington's staff. Huge moment. He was only 22.
Crucial. And Chernow's text details this deep admiration Hamilton had for Washington as a political leader, even if he sometimes doubted the military tactics. And it mentions that bargain, right? Never criticize the general openly.
And Washington style, Chernow uses other accounts.
Yeah, like John Adams calling Washington a great actor with the gift of silence. And he quotes James McHenry, who felt Hamilton's advice really perfected the whole operation,
Yeah.
the machine. The book portrays Hamilton as just central to Washington's communications, drafting everything.
Letters to Congress, governors, other generals.
All of it. But the text also shows another side on staff, describes him as girl crazy and brimming with libido.
Huh, really?
Yeah, flirtatious, almost giddy with women, wooing Catherine Livingston. It, makes him seem a bit more human, maybe.
Definitely rounds him out. Chernow also focuses a lot on friendships. Lafayette, John Laurens.
Big time. The text describes that brotherly affection with Lafayette and quotes Laurens praising Hamilton's openness, integrity, patriotism, and splendid gallantry.
And their duel together.
Yeah, Chernow notes that was Hamilton's first of many such affairs of honor. He uses it to highlight how common dueling was then. An incredible and scandalous point in the Army, the text says. It sets a pattern that, well, we know comes back later.
Okay, let's shift to his personal life. The Schuylers.
Right. Chernow emphasizes that especially happy relationship with his father-in-law, Philip Schuyler. The text even quotes Schuyler being delighted, calling Hamilton an amazing husband.
And Eliza. How does the text portray her?
With real warmth, I think. Beauty, frankness, tender heart, good sense. Those are the qualities Chernow highlights. He uses Hamilton's letters, urging her to read, to cultivate her gifts. Enable yourself to make the distinguished figure. Shays his expectations.
So not just a background figure.
Not at all. The text describes her running the household, teaching the kids. There's that lovely little detail Chernow includes from James Hamilton Jr. of her seated, cutting slices of bread and spreading them with butter. Simple, but telling.
Yeah.
And Chernow portrays her as having this good-natured submission to his career demands, being a sprightly presence at Martha Washington's tea parties. Supportive, but with her own presence.
And then there's Eliza's sister, Angelica Church. Chernow paints her as quite the character.
Oh, absolutely. Craving that high society life, but also, the text notes, longing for Eliza and Alexander back in America, wanting to pass with you the remainder of my days. She clearly admired Hamilton, know how much I love and admire him.
Chernow suggests she was maybe a bit more worldly.
Yeah, hints at that, acting as a go-between for Maria Causeway, those liberal views on extramarital escapades, and the text notes even Jefferson was entranced by her. It's a really complex web of relationships Chernow details there.
Okay, so post-war, the nation's struggling. Chernow shifts focus to the Articles of Confederation.
Right, and his text argues Hamilton saw them as just, completely inadequate. A ramshackle confederacy, he called it. Not up to the job of war or keeping the Union together afterwards.
In this period around Washington, it fostered a different view.
That's what Chernow suggests, that a sense of national unity started seeping in among those guys. And Hamilton came to see building that stronger union as his crowning enterprise, pushed for a convention early on.
And the Constitutional Convention itself. Chernow details Hamilton's role.
Yeah, as a catalyst, even though New York tried to limit his influence. That big June 18th speech, controversial. The dreaded word monarch.
But Chernow argues it wasn't just about monarchy.
No, he argues Hamilton was looking for a principle to resist, the popular currents, restrain majorities and minorities. He quotes Hamilton saying, "Demagogues are not always inconsiderable persons. Patricians could be demagogues too."
Interesting nuance.
Yeah.
And Washington's reaction.
Positive, according to the text. Wanted Hamilton back. And Chernow notes that even though Hamilton didn't love the final compromise, he eventually made full peace with the Constitution.
Which leads right into the Federalist Papers.
Yep. Publius. Chernow's text gets into the authorship, that whole dispute. But he argues the essays aren't just like propaganda for the moment.
He sees consistency.
Yeah, he argues they connect deeply to Hamilton's ideas before and after. Shows his view of this shrinking world needing both economic and military strength. They go hand in hand, as the text puts it.
And Federalist 78 is key in Chernow's count.
Absolutely critical. Chernow highlights this as where Hamilton introduces judicial review. The idea the Supreme Court can strike down unconstitutional laws. He quotes Hamilton, quote, "No legislative act contrary to the Constitution can be valid." Foundational stuff. Chernow argues it laid the groundwork for Chief Justice Marshall, a huge contribution presented in the text.
Okay, so the Constitution is ratified, the government forms, and the battles begin. The Hamilton-Jefferson feud.
Oh, boy. Chernow describes it as just massive, a classic enmity in American history, taking on almost pathological intensity, even though, the text notes, they start out okay.
What does Chernow see as the root causes?
Part of it, the book suggests, was Hamilton's affinity for England, seeing the Revolution as a kind of family fight, admiring the British Constitution. Jefferson, on the other hand, saw Hamilton as trying to muscle in on the State Department. Total opposites in many ways.
And it got nasty fast. The newspaper wars.
Yeah, the text details Hamilton calling out Freneau, accusing Jefferson of disloyalty, even asking if he looks with an eye of female rivalship. Ouch. And Jefferson firing back? Chernow shows Washington getting really worried, pleading for tolerance, fearing the whole thing could fall apart.
Meanwhile, Hamilton's running the Treasury.
From scratch, basically. Chernow describes it as this tiny embryonic branch and emphasizes Hamilton wrote everything himself. No ghostwriters for that massive output, especially the public credit report, getting it out fast, staking his claim.
And his big idea, funding the debt.
Right. Chernow presents Hamilton's argument. It would provide liquid capital the struggling economy desperately needed. Now that famous quote, public debts are public blessings.
Yeah, everyone knows that one.
Chernow actually calls it a tortured expression in the text. He shows Hamilton getting testy, reminding people he always wanted to extinguish the debt eventually. Says his warnings about too much debt actually outnumbered the praise.
That's a really important clarification from the text, and Madison opposed this.
Strongly. The text explains Madison wanted any profit from the debt's rising value to go to the original soldiers and patriots, not the speculators who bought it up cheap. Saw it as unfair.
And Chernow points out the slavery issue lurking in the background.
Yeah, that bipartisan decision to shelve the slavery issue, as the text puts it, had huge consequences. It meant the Southern economy wasn't really challenged, and all the political energy focused on Hamilton's Northern financial system instead.
And Jefferson as Secretary of State. Chernow contrasts them.
Big time. Hamilton jumped right in. Jefferson kind of dithered, the text suggests. Chernow details Jefferson's background, his intense study, but also his implacable aversion to the British, contrasted with his love for French society.
The grandee, gourmet, hedonist description.
Exactly. Living it up in Paris, lavish hotel, big staff, even a frateur, someone to rub him down. Chernow uses these details from the historical record to paint a picture of very, very different men.
The clash over assuming state debts was huge.
The Assumption Bill. Chernow calls it the most bitter and angry contest, led to that famous dinner deal.
The compromise. Assumption for the capital moving south.
That's how Chernow presents it, though he notes Madison still voted against it. That whole fight, the text argues, really opened the chasm that created the first political parties, shattered the early unity.
Okay, let's turn to the intense rivalries and crises Hamilton seemed to attract. Chernow notes a kind of paradox.
Yeah, that central mystery he presents. Hamilton being super sensitive to criticism himself, but often seeming totally insensitive to how his own words landed on others.
And the attacks on him got personal.
Very. The text mentions William Tell, calling him Machiavellian, power-mad, accusing his private character as still worse than your public one. Chernow shows this became a pattern. Attack the man when you can't beat his arguments.
Like in that 1792 New York governor race.
Whoa, yeah. Special venom, the text calls it. Chernow notes the Clintonians went after his foreign birth, supposedly mixed race, illegitimacy, anything to chop him down to size. Really nasty stuff.
Which all kind of feeds into the Reynolds affair exposure.
Right. Chernow recounts it vividly. The rumors, Klingman's hints, then Hamilton's meeting with Reynolds. The text describes him as extremely agitated, walking backward and forward, striking his forehead and thigh, saying he had enemies, ready to meet them.
Chernow says that agitation was typical Hamilton under stress.
Yeah, he points that out. But the real bombshell in Chernow's account is Monroe's role later.
How so?
Well, Monroe met with Hamilton about it initially, but later, Chernow explains, a memo Monroe was involved with got published by Calendar, suggesting the affair was just a cover-up for financial misdeeds at Treasury.
Implying Hamilton lied about the affair.
Or at least, Chernow argues, Monroe seemed to give that idea tacit credence, didn't deny it strongly. The text recounts Hamilton demanding Monroe repudiate Calendar. Monroe refused, saying the matter ought to be buried.
Leading to the pamphlet.
Exactly. Hamilton felt he had to write the Reynolds pamphlet, lay out all the sordid details himself. Chernow describes Eliza reading it, fainting, their son deeply disturbed. It shows the immense personal cost.
And that final chilling detail about Eliza and Monroe years later.
Decades later, Monroe tries to smooth things over, visits Eliza. And Chernow quotes her response, sent via a messenger. Mrs. Hamilton has nothing to say to Mr. Monroe. Ice cold. Shows the depth of that wound as Chernow presents it.
Wow. Switching gears slightly, Chernow also covers Hamilton's reaction to the French Revolution.
He was horrified. The text quotes him talking about streets literally red with blood. He contrasts the American Revolution, a free, regular, and deliberate act, a revolution written in parchment, with what he saw as French licentiousness.
And this shaped his foreign policy views.
Absolutely. Chernow's text presents him arguing for neutrality because the U.S. was too weak, too divided. He backed Washington against Citizen Genet's provocations, wanting that ship, La Petite Démocratie, sent away. Chernow frames it as a key moment. Washington shows Hamilton's caution over Jefferson's pro-French stance.
Okay, moving toward the end, the election of 1800. Jefferson and Burr tie. Huge drama.
Massive. And Chernow really puts Hamilton at the center of the resolution. Federalists were thinking maybe Burr is better than Jefferson.
But Hamilton said no.
Vehemently. The text emphasizes his fierce opposition, calling Burr profoundly immoral, lacking principles, more dangerous than Jefferson. He argued Jefferson was the less dangerous option, would allow time for things to cool down.
So Chernow argues Hamilton's intervention was decisive.
Yeah, the text presents it as key, putting principle, his view of Burr's character, above party loyalty. Then Burr tries that comeback in 1804, running for NY governor.
Against Hamilton's faction. More conflict.
Right. Chernow describes Burr being hypersensitive to the attacks flying around, and notes that Burr's supporters blamed Hamilton for ruining his career. The stage was set.
For the duel, Chernow doesn't see it's just one insult.
No, the text talks about accumulative insults. The Cooper letter was just the trigger. Burr's demand for an explanation was basically signaling an affair of honor was coming.
And Hamilton felt trapped.
That's how Chernow portrays his internal conflict. His whole life pointed towards confronting insults, not backing down. Yet the text notes he developed this principled aversion to dueling, especially after his son Philip died in one.
It even denounced it publicly.
Yeah, in the Croswell case called it interdicted by the laws of God and man. But Chernow suggests he felt compelled maybe by public opinion, societal pressure, to go through with it against his own wishes.
The text details the preparations.
Making his will, worried about debts, creditors. Chernow includes the tense back and forth with Burr's second, Van Ness. Hamilton trying to delay Van Ness, seeing him agitated, walking backward and forward. Burr felt Hamilton was just being evasive.
And the duel itself.
Yeah.
July 11th, 1804, Weehawken.
Chernow draws on the second's accounts. Pendleton, Hamilton's second, insisted Burr fired first, and Hamilton's shot was involuntary, just a spasm from the mortal wound.
Hamilton knew instantly.
Yeah, the text quotes him, "I was a dead man the moment I fell." Tragic.
Chernow describes the funeral as incredibly emotional.
A most solemn scene, the text says. Nearly everyone weeping, even the rabble of boys and Negroes. Gouverneur Morris gave the oration. Just immense public grief.
And Burr's reaction. Chernow presents conflicting accounts.
Right. Some reports of bloodless composure, even dark humor. Others, via Van Ness, insist Burr showed only regret and displeasure. Chernow also notes Burr's immediate financial worries, asking Van Ness, "Can you aid me?" and his complicated personal life continuing. It paints a complex picture of Burr, too.
Finally, Chernow gives a lot of attention to Eliza's legacy.
He really does, and it's powerful. The text highlights her resilience, her fierce, unending loyalty, argues it shows the marriage, despite everything, was rewarding for her, calls her heart forgiving.
Even after everything.
Yeah, believing God had a design. She called Hamilton her beloved, sainted husband. But that loyalty had limits, as we saw with Monroe.
That refusal to see him.
Decades later, Mrs. Hamilton has nothing to say to Mr. Monroe. Chernow uses that to show the depth of her feeling, her unwavering defense of Hamilton's honor.
And Chernow pushes back on the image of her as just broken.
Absolutely. The text argues against depictions of her as just weeping. It portrays her as a woman of towering strength and integrity, consecrating her long widowhood to helping others, widows, orphans, poor children.
Her work with the orphanage.
Central to his portrayal of her later life, mainstay of the board, deputy director, using her pitying, loving nature blended with a rare sense of justice for those kids. Cornerstone laying in 1807. Tireless work.
A different kind of strength.
Exactly. Chernow closes her story, noting she treasured that inscription from Hamilton, "I heal all wounds but those which love hath made," but argues in the text that her wounds never really healed. She lives to 97, sees the Union Hamilton fought for gravely imperiled. A very poignant connection Chernow makes there.
And just to give a peek behind Chernow's process, as mentioned in the text itself, he talks in the acknowledgments about specific discoveries, like finding Hamilton's early journalism.
Right, for the Royal Danish American Gazette at the Wim Library in St. Croix.
Exactly. And Chernow says that helped him grasp Hamilton's writing roots. He thanks people who helped him understand the Caribbean context, showing how that deep dive into those sources informed the insights in this book we're discussing.
Yeah, it really shows how that close reading of the raw materials builds the analysis, doesn't it?
It does. So what does this all mean? We've taken this deep dive into specific moments, specific insights that Chernow draws directly from the source material. We've looked at Hamilton's, well, surprising start, the complexities in his relationships, his intense drive, part intellect, part vulnerability, and that incredible endurance of Eliza that the text brings out so strongly.
And looking at these details from Chernow's text, you get a much more, well, human feel for him, right? He wasn't just this figurehead. It shows the messiness, the passion, the real personal cost involved in building a nation, all powerfully presented in these pages.
Definitely. So here's something to think about, reflecting on Chernow's text. What does all that intense, constant conflict surrounding Hamilton's life, as Chernow chronicles it, tell us about political ambition itself, about creating a nation? And does focusing on these really vivid personal details from the text change how you see his public achievements? Something to chew on.